Recording? Awesome. All right, so we got a couple topics planned for you today. So I'm Michael from Microfocus, and I'll be talking about enhancing your Selenium projects using Microfocus's LeanFT. And if you aren't aware of what LeanFT is, I'll be able to paint a clear picture on exactly what that is. And real quick introduction for Applitools.
I'm Burnett. I'm an enterprise account executive at Applitools. That's where I'm working. My counterpart, EJ. We're going to talk to you a little bit today about the ability to do automated visual testing using artificial intelligence. Pretty cool stuff. It's more of an education process, I think, for us now, that it's even something that you're able to do. So we'll get in deeper.
Perfect. So just kind of a quick insight into the agenda, pretty basic, spending about a little bit less than a half hour on what exactly LeanFT is, how we can use it with Selenium, and then I'll go into the demo portion, and then kind of similar agenda with Applitools as well. So that will get started. And also Ankit is also here with Microfocus. He's a colleague of mine as well, doing the same thing, solutions architect for application delivery management. He's also got past experience with using Selenium and Selenium projects. So if I don't have an answer, if y'all chime in with a question, I might also deflect it to him just to see if he knows the answer. If not, of course, we'll always follow up with you. All right, so I wanted to put this together just in case you weren't aware. Microfocus is actually a platinum sponsor of Selenium. So there was a lot of interim for a while where open source was a competitor of any type of commercial product out there. But we just kind of figured out that everybody's embracing open source. So how do we stop fighting with them and just start becoming friends? So it was also probably a shock when Selenium users are seeing a commercial product on we have a booth at their Selenium conferences. So this is a survey that I wanted to share with you, just the results from it that came back from the Selenium conference. Had about 15 challenges listed on there, and then another box just to put what they wanted to, and just ask them what are the top 5 challenges that you have. And so the first one came in first place. 2 of those common challenges was creating a test that can be easily used for cross-browser testing. That's not something I'm going to be showing today. I can certainly follow up with anybody who is interested in learning more about that. But another one that is a common challenge that I will be addressing is being able to handle fragile or missing locators. That also cause a lot of investment in time for script maintenance. And then after that, over 25%, 2 more challenges was being able to create an environment, having to maintain that environment, and execute on those desired metrics. I'll show that towards the very end, how we can help host a digital lab for you when you're ready to have these scripts ready to go and execute them. And then support for the not typical web technology, but the ones that it's surrounding, such as AngularJS. We can certainly support that and extend those technologies that are being used. I don't know if there are remote attendees right now. I'm hearing some noise in the background. If you can just mute them for me. Then a few more. In the third place was learning which object locators should be used to be able to have unique object identification, recognition, dealing with object synchronization timeouts, and then facilitating reporting so that we can have those for logging and auditing capabilities, as well as just visibly understand for somebody who doesn't even know what's going on inside that test, but can pull it up and easily see what that test includes. And for those of you who don't know exactly what LeanFT is, even in the first place, you might have seen it marketed as UFT Pro, so we always joke saying LeanFT, open parentheses, UFT Pro, close parentheses. But it is, I guess, more commonly known as LeanFT. So just real quick, it is a enterprise-level functional test automation solution, and it's designed for developers and dev testers and the agile teams, and specifically for continuous integration and testing. So for all intents and purposes, if you're familiar with Selenium, then you can kind of think of it as Selenium, but also while we can enhance those projects, specifically LeanFT native projects can also do a lot more in extending those capabilities. But as far as what it is, just a little bit more, it's a plugin that provides project templates, those libraries. We can extend those with the Selenium projects, and it just helps you preventing from having to create a lot of things from scratch that you might have to do. Just with a Selenium native project, we can help reduce a lot of the time that it takes to create everything that's included inside that test, as well as just the robustness of that test. So LeanFT itself Just a lot of capabilities here. It's a beefy slide, but just being able to support a lot of the integrations with just the IDE of supporting for IntelliJ, Eclipse, Visual Studios for the developers that are using that, and being able to support cross-platform. So not just web applications, being able to integrate and support mobile applications, as well as desktop applications and SAP, so we can enhance that. And then, of course, parallel execution, so we can reduce the time that takes the script. And testing the cloud, I'll go into that when we talk about execution on the desired matrix that we have to execute against. And then, of course, with the DevOps ecosystem, integrations with the CI system, Jenkins, Bamboo, and being able to integrate with, of course, our own Micro Focus tools for end-to-end test management, leveraging assets from functional testing to also performance testing. So that's kind of a high level of what LeanFT is. So exactly how does it work with Selenium? So the way that LeanFT works with Selenium, and we'll get a little bit clearer picture of this in the demonstration, is just a couple of those challenges that we talked about with being able to handle those missing locators to reduce the amount of time that it takes to maintain those scripts, as well as uniquely identify those objects, and then being able to easily provide reporting. So, you know, maybe for you have a Selenium project, you have a reporting framework in place already. So this could make this easier, or it could be used for the projects that maybe there's no framework already there, and we'll see how easy that is to create. Also enhancing the script, we'll just go over kind of one of the challenges that we talked about with synchronization timeouts, and then talking about the integration with the pipeline, with the integrations with Jenkins, and then just the test execution side of it, of how we can leverage the script that we have and execute that to environments that we either have and it takes a lot of time to maintain and money and overhead, or maybe we don't even have access to environments such as the beta version browser or the newest ones that we need to test. So with that, all right already, I kind of got an idea. Can you just show me? So we'll go into the demo portion. So here I am inside of the developer's IDE. So again, supporting the frameworks of, yeah, thank you, the lights. Supporting IntelliJ, Visual Studio, and Eclipse. So we can see on top of here, I've got my LeanFT plugin. And what I have in here, I'll make this a little bit bigger so hopefully it's easier to see, is I've got a Selenium Java test. And typical with anybody who's created a Selenium test, I'm going to be importing my Java libraries and these lines here. And then, of course, I need to decide what type of framework I'm going to use. You know, JUnit, NUnit, TestNG. For here, I'm using JUnit as my framework. And this is all typical as part of creating that Selenium test. What's added inside of this Selenium project is I'm importing the LeanFT SDK, and then the utilities, I'm importing some of these actions within here that I'll be able to show later on in the script. So of course, everything else is standard reporting to this application. And just to give you an idea of what this application is that might help give a little bit better visual reference, is our own online shopping called Advantage Online Shopping, just like an e-commerce site. So we'll be going through, you know, selecting the tablets, checking the price, and part of our validation will be doing a price check. So that's just a quick insight into the application that this script is actually testing against. So going back into the script, everything else will be standard as part of your Selenium project. So how exactly do you get it started? So after we import those libraries, those LeanFT libraries SDK, here we're just instantiating that SDK. And when we talk about the reporting capabilities, this is where we instantiate that reporter, and then we're going to leverage the snapshot capability of that so that we can see that when we have the test run and make those reports a lot more easily to read and easier for auditing. So all that's really left after that, I'm just going to go into my test section. So again, standard as part of the Selenium, I'm incorporating my WebDriver. This is I'm going to be using for Chrome today. And then here we've got the reporter. Now we've just given it a name, and we'll see this once we, at the very end, once we run this test, how this is going to be easier. But this is basically me customizing the report. This is the name saying, I want my report to say where we're launching that Selenium WebDriver. I've given it a description on these lines here. I'm just using HTML tags So I've got headings, basically however you want to kind of manipulate this. You can customize your report with LeanFT native projects. This is all coming out of the box, but here it's simple lines of code within the Selenium project itself. And then I'm just pointing to that test URL as well. Next, within the test, I'm just waiting until these expected condition happens. And you'll notice here, I've got a locator called visible text. And so anybody who's dealt with Selenium projects knows that this will recognize this is not a locator that I've seen within Selenium. And that's exactly right, because this is part of a LeanFT extension that we're adding to those Selenium projects. So I'm going to go into here real quick and show you one of the enhancements that we have when we talk about those missing locators and uniquely identifying an object property. And I'm going to replicate that same line of code. Go ahead.
I think you're not sharing your screen.
Say again?
You're not sharing your screen in the Zoom meeting.
So it stopped at demo.
Yeah.
Oh, it stopped at demo time?
Yeah.
Maybe I have to start again with, maybe it's not captured in the VMware. Let me try real quick. It says it's sharing there. Stop. Let me reshare. See if I can pick up this other screen. Tell me if it is able to pick it up.
Yeah.
That's okay. Great. Actually, don't need that. So here's the object identification consider. I might call it the object spy, but I'm just going to launch the Chrome browser. And all I have to do is click the spy and let me navigate to that application that we were just talking about earlier. And we can see that it's already locating the different objects within the page itself. So for here, I want to click on the tablets, and then we'll see the full tree hierarchy of the object that I selected into. And this is showing the logical to physical description of that object. And so I can start all the way at the bottom. If I want to move back up, I can start there, and I can click this eye to highlight on the object that I want to identify. And then on the right side, we see different object properties, which you might be familiar with Selenium. You know, your ID, your XPath, CSS selector. But here's where we've got that visible text locator that we're adding. And so with this, I can just use one object property, and I can highlight, and it's going to uniquely be able to identify that tablet. I can also choose, maybe I don't want to uniquely identify it. So for instance, this role link, I can highlight and I can see that there's 37 objects that have that same role of link, and maybe I want to roll it back. Whatever meets my business process or the goal of this test, I can do that. But this is a really easy way to be able to identify those. So imagine, you know, what would be standard for a Selenium project is that in order for, let's say we have a test that we're not able to identify those object properties, we'd have to go in and inspect the element. We'd have to go find the object properties, decide for ourselves what we're going to use to uniquely identify it. We're going to pull that into the test, and then we're going to have to rerun the test to see if it was successful or not. Now that takes a lot of time, not only just to go in there and to find it, but also then spending the time that you take to run the test, and imagine how many times you're doing that for each test until you find exactly what object property you're trying to identify. For instance, that one where we saw 37, how long would it take you to drill it back down to 1 to realize that this is what is uniquely identified, at least during this release of the application? So this saves a bunch of time being able to just have these properties here available to select from. I can quickly highlight instead of going through that whole process that I just explained, and be able to identify that. And then also, just to make things even easier, I can copy the clipboard and just paste this straight into my IDE. So I can close out of these because I don't need these anymore. And it's just as simple as pasting into here. And there's my code. And now all I have to do is add the method. So a common one being click that I've done above. But there you get an idea that, you know, if I had no programming background whatsoever, I can easily go in here and not have to worry about maybe learning a different language or just helping to reduce the time it takes and copy the clipboard and then just apply that method here. And of course, we've got IntelliSense that we can choose for any options that we want to based off of the test. I don't need this anymore, and I can delete this line. Going back to the synchronization timeouts, we talked about those synchronizations within Selenium that we can do. We've got this thread sleep that could be used. We've also got these timeouts. This makes it a little bit easier within Selenium, but also within LeanFT native projects, we can just simply change the settings of the runtime engine. Also, the utilities, where this is another thing that we're pulling in by using LeanFT on top of Selenium, is as this test is getting executed, we're going to see it highlight through the steps that we're going through. It's going to put that into the report, get a snapshot of it, and then we've got, again, another step name and description that we'll see in the report. There's another utility that we're using to easily import those into our report. Another locator that we're adding is this by each. So this is a compound or a composite locator that is going to leverage both the tag name of A and then the visible text that we've talked about before. And then notice here that we're also using regular expressions. So this is going to be doing finding that price, and then based off of these tag names, the visible text, it's going to have that regular expression, and then we're going to do a verification on that. And that's exactly what we're doing in these steps. And again, we're going to have one that's going to pass, we're going to have one that's going to fail, so that you see what those look like. And this is just more of the same of giving that a name, how it's going to look like in the report, and taking that snapshot. And then at the bottom here, right after this, I'll run the test. At the bottom, we're actually switching to LeanFT launching the same browser as Selenium. So we'll see this in our report, but this allows us to have additional capabilities, and we're attaching to that browser. And then you'll see here, we talked about the copy and pasting. This is where I'm copying and pasting that LeanFT portion, and I'll go into this, this portion right after we run the test. So let's give it a quick run. And then after this, we'll be able to see the HTML report that we can leverage for those easily to read and notice exactly what's going on with the test, even if I'm not the one who ran this. So here, we're going to click on that price. There's where we're using that utility highlight. So it's a nice feature that as this is running through and making sure the script works, it's showing exactly what's being captured in that test. And then right after this, we'll be able to pull up the run results. All right, so here's that failed step that we were looking for a price of $1,999, but the actual price was $1,900. This report also includes other environmental factors in case this is part of maybe our root cause analysis to see if this is what's causing the test failure. And then here's that test flow. We talked about the description and the names that I was giving it. Here's where it's going back to saying that we launched that Selenium WebDriver. Accordion price, what is that? This is actually capturing the image so that you know exactly what that is in case there's some ambiguity. There's that failed step again. Here's the past one. We've captured the image of that price that was the past verification. And then here's where we switch over to that LeanFT driving the same browser that Selenium was running before. It's attached to it. And then notice here, in my code, I didn't have to add anything for being able to grab the snapshot. And I can look into this. This is going to provide me exactly what this step is going through. But the point is, I don't have to add anything to being able to capture this. This is being done automatically. So that's just a quick insight into the reporting. And I'm going to breeze through a little bit more of this. But the next thing was, how do we help reduce the maintenance of script time? And the way that we would do that is by leveraging LeanFT's application model. And that is easily imported in here by using the object spy. So I'm not going to pull it up again. We saw it before with the little hat. But basically, I can go into the application, import the object properties that I have, and then this is building out a list. So anybody who's familiar with UFT and the object repository of UFT, this is basically the same thing, but it's LeanFT calling it the application model instead of the object repository. So we have this object here. We can see what properties are being used. And then what's really nice too is that I can use this visual reference identification. So this is great if we have a lot of the objects with the same buttons, but maybe a specific one that's to a right of a certain picture or a certain logo. We can use that for identification. And so the next thing would be, okay, well, that's great, but is this only for my individual test? Like, no, this can be used for multiple releases. You have an application with a different language. We can use this, and how we do that, I'm going to switch over to a LeanFT native test. And notice how simplified this line of code is, but basically I've called in the browser, and I've called in the application model, which is called AOS model, and this is where it's pulling in that object. Instead of a lot of more coding that we see, I've really simplified it to say, I want you to highlight the speakers, I want you to click on it, and the test continues with verifications and price, regular expressions, and then we can pull out the same report, but this is done out of the box. There's no code in here that you see that includes reporting or having to pull that in. So that covers the challenges with how to reduce the time it takes to maintain our scripts. Really, what's left after that is that now I've got my script, I've got it ready to go. So what's next? I want to be able to execute this on all my desired matrices. Is this still showing the screen that I'm pulling up right now? No? Okay, let me stop and reshare, I guess was the fix before. And let me know when it's sharing. Okay, so here's where I've gone into a different solution called StormRunner Functional. And this is basically your test lab that you're executing on all your environments, your operating systems, your Windows, your browsers, browser versions, resolution types. Instead of having to maintain that on-prem, we can host it for you in the cloud. And what I've done is I've uploaded a script. We can support upload for UFT scripts, LeanFT, as well as Selenium scripts. And I've uploaded that Selenium script as well as another one. And I've gone and created an automation suite. Let me minimize this. And here are two scripts. Here's a Selenium script. Here's my Applitools script for a hello world. And now, instead of having to maintain that lab, I have access to the entire environments. Again, going back to the operating systems, the most popular browser types and versions. And just with a few clicks of the buttons, I can run those two scripts on all 12 of these environments, and I can run those in parallel. And so what happens is at the end, you can get this results, and we can see, we've got a lot of red here, we've got a lot of work to do, but here's environment, Chrome. We actually see that there's a difference. I know because I've run this test before. This was something that had to do with resolution. And from a Selenium user's perspective, this automatically took this test and was able to capture screenshots and has a reporting similar to what we saw with LeanFT, but it certainly simplifies how you are able to get those results, what kind of information you're getting behind it, and that's a Selenium script. The next one is this Applitools Hello World Check, and StormRunner Functional actually does integrations with Applitools to be able to not only see this reporting inside of here, but I can also get notifications with this script and the results on Applitools. So let's see. Here I've got the same idea where I've got pictures being taken, and I've got this nice link here taking me directly to Applitools to be able to dig down further. And from there, I just want to hand it over to Hardy and EJ.
Thanks. Share the screen.
So I just want to present.
Oh yeah, I gotta put this thing. trying to see if you can see my voice talking. Is it still on? I hit a button, so
Should be. Check it real quick.
everybody's muted on the line, so I don't know if they can hear me or not.
Let me check audio. Let's see if I can chat. Actually, if you start talking, yeah. It's easy to see
Okay.
the talking at the bottom.
Okay.
You should be good.
Y'all bear with my limp until I get up there. I know y'all saw my title. I'm an enterprise account executive. I haven't always been this worthless. I actually was an engineer for most of my career, 7 years of those at Mercury Interactive. So I had a pretty big background in the software development life cycle. You know, everything from I've used Quick Test Pro, UFT, Test Director, Load Runner, all those good things. And I got on the monitoring side of the business when they started that. So I got a little background in this. I'm not just the salesy guy. So I'm going to walk you through high level. Who is Applitools, what it is that we do, what is visual testing, and the things that we can do to help out. So Applitools was founded in 2013. We actually launched our product in 2015. It's based on cognitive artificial intelligence, which means we can see or mimic what the human brain and eye can see, right? So we eliminate a ton of false positives using artificial intelligence. If you think about people that try to do visual testing or automate visual testing in the past, you were limited to doing pixel-to-pixel comparisons, which had a high failure rate. So we'll get into that a little more. So we invented visual AI. One of the things that's really impressive to me is if you look over the past 3 years since we released our product, the adoption rate and the number of actual visual validations that are being run out in the field. And then we support all levels of customers, whether you're a startup company, whether you're a small, medium business, or whether you're a Fortune 100 company. Across all verticals as well. So if you're a good company, no matter what silo or what vertical that your business is in. And then, as you guys know, digital transformation is happening everywhere, all around us. Companies are digitizing their business at an alarming rate of speed. And the biggest bottleneck seems to be, how do you visually test that? So what's become so complex is, you start not having the ability to have full test coverage, because if you look at the numbers, the combinations of operating systems types, all the different devices that are out there, the different browsers that could be on, all those different variations, you put those together and it just creates this huge, massive things that need to be tested visually, right? And there's just not the manpower to do that. So, and regardless of that, the company still expects you to, have faster releases more frequently. And so, as you start to automate everything, how do you automate your visual testing? A lot of times, as we see out there, when there's bottlenecks, it most of the time it gets blamed on the QA process, right? We don't have enough testers. We have to do it manually. We can't automate that. So it seems to become the bottleneck. And, a little bit about why us. So what we do is we ensure visually perfect user experiences, whether or not it's rendering on different browsers, different operating systems, any device, right? We guarantee that even if something passed the functional test, the button is still available, whether it renders on a different browser. The colors are still the same things that you wouldn't pick up in a functional test, that are important to your user. So a lot of you in the room probably familiar with ADM, Application Delivery Management, which to this point, most testing has been done manually. And APM, I know there's folks in the room that are familiar with that, Application Performance Management, but not the ability to monitor things in production from a visual perspective. So we are the leaders in a new category. In a new category called AVM, or Application Visual Management, and that's giving companies the ability to find visual defects before they hit production, which is very costly, reduce the amount of time that it takes testers to test to free them up to do other tasks, and then the ability to monitor these things in production too. So whether you have something on your website that's, there's regulations around or fines around if you don't put this disclaimer, then you could be fined. We can monitor for those things in productions where a typical monitoring tool couldn't do that. as well as just make sure things are rendering properly across all the different devices. And the reason for that is to make sure that things like this don't happen, right? So if you take a look at this screen here, here's a button. This is our tool. On the left, you see a baseline. It's taken the first time you run a test. And on the right side is a difference that we found when we ran the test the following time. So a button that passed a functional test now isn't, you can't see what the button says on the screen because it didn't render in the right place. And it happens to everyone, right? The problem is that a lot of companies or a lot of people don't know that it's happening unless I tell them, EJ tells them, or one of their users tell them, because they're not testing for those. They're not seeing that there's too many devices. Maybe they rendered on a device that wasn't tested on. And so they have no visibility into these problems until they get reported or somebody puts it on Twitter or whatever else. So it happens to Spotify. It happens to Amazon, where they're, here's one that was a performance problem, right? But they didn't know what that was doing to the end users. So they couldn't even navigate or do some of the things that they needed to do on the site. It happens to Amazon on their mobile application as well. It happens to Financial Times, as you can see down here. Text is bleeding over. One headline is bleeding over into first paragraph. I've got to. Good thing I used to be an engineer, so I can fix it. EJ must have done something to my computer.
It was me. Yep.
Okay. So the point is that it happens to everyone, even UPS. Here's an example of these columns bleeding over, frames bleeding over onto each other where the map is, and you can't read the actual content here because it was rendered on a device that didn't test on, right? It may have worked fine on one version of iPad or the iPad, but not on a newer version. Another one that happens to Southwest. I mean, it goes on and on. We even have a Twitter feed called GUI Gone Wild because we run across it so much that we post them out there for people to see because people just aren't aware that they're happening a lot of the time. Here's one with TripAdvisor, one with Microsoft, right, where we were watching their site for them and their graphs are going off. This is Azure and it's going off the screen here. Right, so how do we do it? I spoke a little bit earlier about it being AI powered. It's very simple. If we talk about Selenium, you can leverage an existing script. You add basically 3 lines of code to that. It's sending screenshots to our server. We do the validations, tell you if something's different. If you're using something like the Micro Focus solution, then they're already automatically capturing those screenshots. They send those to our servers. We do the validation, tell you if there's any differences. You determine whether you want to update the baseline or call this a bug, right, and how you want to handle that. Once again, it's cognitive artificial intelligence, and we have multiple algorithms so that we can do layout, strict, exact, different algorithms to either include things or not include things. We'll get into that in a little more detail. It's very scalable, as we talked about earlier. If you look at that hockey stick, it's going up on how many visual validations that we're running a month, millions. So very scalable, and it's all automated. You can leverage this like into your automation tools that are already existing. So integrations with your favorites, right? So if you talk about languages, we have over 40 different SDKs. We have it for Selenium, Appium, QTP, or PDFs, you name it. We can integrate with those frameworks, your testing frameworks as well, Micro Focus, of course, and then, ecosystems. So you're using Jira for bug tracking or continuous integration with Jenkins, all those things. We have direct integrations too, so that they can feed information. So like I said earlier, it's really easy to get started. It's all about a screenshot, whether Micro Focus is taking the screenshot in their solution, passing it to us, and we give the final result to them, or whether you're integrating with an Appium or a Selenium script and telling it to take the screenshot and send it to our server. You're basically driving that automated user test and taking screenshots. Once the screenshot hits our server, we compare those screenshots for you with the baseline. The baseline happens the first time. Every test thereafter is compared to that baseline. If there's a difference, we'll tell you there's a difference. That's the reporting differences, step 3. And at the very end, what we'll do is you determine whether you want to update the baseline or not. So EJ's going to show you some more details how this really helps with the management test cases and your tests, your validations that you're running, because you may have a single bug that causes 100 failures, right? Because it costs 100 pages. And with one click of the button, you can update everything. You either update the baseline or you can create a bug and fix it. If you look at where we provide value across the enterprise, it's all the way down from all the way from manual testing to the business executives, DevOps engineers, front-end developers, where they can test the new UIs before they release it into testing, test automation engineers, and then there's a lot of use cases too. So if you look, visual functional regression testing, visual acceptance testing and monitoring, user experience testing, monitoring, dynamic and cross-browser testing, localization testing. So if your application or your site has multiple languages, we can run those tests in multiple languages and tell if the layout of your application is correct or incorrect and not take into account the language that's involved. So that text shifting or anything else. A few of the key benefits here is the ability to do a single page validation. We can take a screenshot of the entire page, whether it's this long and that wide, or whatever it is. We stitch all that together. It's all automatic. You don't have to do any work. Automatic maintenance. It's a little bit what I talked about, the ability to manage multiple test cases at once, accept, update a bunch of baselines for, create a bug. Localization testing is something that's very popular, and EJ will enhance multiple language testing, and really the ability to reduce false positives. Since this year, we've increased our number from 4 nines of accuracy to 5 nines just recently. So we're proud of that. As we continue, the more we do, the machine learning keeps happening, the algorithms, everything gets smarter, and we're more effective. So we've really reduced the number of false positives. And so, there's several different areas that can help you improve your business. Return on your test coverage. Obviously, you can test much more effectively, quicker, with less resources. Those resources aren't something that you want to replace. They have plenty of other tasks that they want to do, and this allows them to be more effective in their roles, doing things that are, frankly, more, if you got something like this that can run your tests for you, then there's no need to have those people spending the time on that when they can focus on something else. Return on quality, so catching those bugs quicker in the testing cycle, or especially before they get to production. Test automation, and return on cost for reducing the manual testing that needs to be done. These are just some examples that our real customers are seeing. You can see, on time savings alone, upwards of, it averages between 75 to 90% reduction in time it takes to test, do visual testing. And then if you start throwing defects in there and saving defects, stopping defects before they get into production, you really start to see some big dollar ROI savings. And that's it. Unless there's any questions, I'm going to turn it over to EJ and let him actually show you the product. Yeah.
How do you do that? You can't just like that. Data like behind the scenes, or
I'm sorry.
your machine learning. How do you store that in things like 4 nines and 5? You have something like health stack or big data behind the
Yeah,
scenes.
so I don't know the technology behind the scenes. I can certainly get you an answer for that, but I can tell you this: we don't have any problem with data storage. A lot of people wonder, how long can we store stuff? Every screenshot that we take in the millions, as you saw, we're doing like 20 million in 1 quarter last year, right? Every screenshot since the day we started is still stored on our instance of Azure.
So it's all cloud-based.
Yeah, it's all cloud-based. There's some very few cases where you're dealing with the federal government or something like that, or with approval, they could run an instance on their own. But the problem with that is that doesn't learn anymore from their systems because it's inside and we don't have access to it. So it doesn't do any learning on their systems and get smarter on theirs. So, I mean, I can get you any information that you want on what the technology is.
I think most of that just figured it was on plan market for things cloud.
Yeah, my best non-technical answer to that is that the algorithms, again, were invented by our founders back in 2013. And 6 years later, they're getting smarter each day. We're taking data, we're taking, customer inputs and really developing and making our algorithms smarter and stronger to identify new bugs and then spreading that to the product. So that's really where the machine learning comes into play. Does that help answer your question? Share my screen here. And I'll take you through, I know we only have a few minutes left. We can kind of save Q&A at the end. Unless you have a pressing question, please interrupt me. I'll take you through the platform. So I share my screen. All right, so I want to start off on our tutorial page. So if you go to applitools.com, we have a free trial available. So if you're super interested in trying it out, you can sign up. If you want to expand to that, or you can email myself or Hardy, we can say free trial without adding the marketing list, because everyone hates that. So just a quick 1, 2, 3 step process of how to really add Applitools to your automation code. As Hardy mentioned, we're pretty agnostic to any language or automation framework you're using. So as you can see, all our supported frameworks are listed below. So I'll click the Selenium Java example here. And even so, if you're not, you have a user, maybe more so on the marketing team that has no coding experience, Applitools has, kind of a glorified web crawling solution that you can literally import a list of URLs and instantly validate your web application as well. So it doesn't have to be through automation framework if you have team members that don't know how to code. So, implementing the SDK through Maven or independently the jars, and just to show you kind of the unique elements of Applitools into a sample Selenium Java test here. Each Applitools account, you get your own API keyword you enter here. And really the assertions that I want to call out right now, eyes.check window, and within it you can name the screenshot. Eyes.check window is essentially taking the screenshot in your test. That's all you need to take a full page screenshot. So let's say if you have hundreds, maybe thousands of lines of code, each time you're making a script and you have those assertions like this, making sure that the box remains blue. With using Applitools, there's really no need for that, essentially. So take a full page screenshot with eyes.check window, that one call, we'll take that full page screenshot, that is your baseline. And then every subsequent test run can be compared to that baseline. So it doesn't need, therefore you don't need those additional lines of code to assert, to really validate those additional components on the page. Does that make sense? So it's really reducing the amount of script maintenance. That's one really great use case our customers love about us. So I'll jump into the platform. As you can see on the screen, this is the UI of Applitools, and a quick tour on the left-hand side are my batches, what we call a group of test runs. This is a demo account, so there's a lot of them in here, but basically selected one, and within this one batch, there's a multiple amount of tests. As you can see, maybe you took StormRunner and you ran this across one application of GitHub, and you ran it across multiple OSs, browsers, and viewports. So you generated a bunch of tests, and I can click in each test and see the script. So, and I can also click into these images and play back the script if I wanted to. You can see the click path, things like that. So essentially, Applitools is verifying the image validation. So I can therefore show my baseline image on the left-hand side, what I told the platform is correct. And then my subsequent test run on the right-hand side, And by a simple click of the button, Applitools can call out what was different between the two screenshots. I can scroll into it. As you can see, if I remove the differences, my logo from my baseline changed to green on my test run. So therefore, this is a pretty generic example. I can tell it to, hey, my developer pushed a release. The new green logo is what we want to go forward with. If I click this button, this new test run will become my baseline going forward for new test runs. Or if that was a bug, I can reject that test run and keep my existing baseline. And more so with our iterations, let's say, hey, that was a bug. I can select that. I can highlight it. I can send that through to a teammate. I can create a new Jira instance, right? Plug it right into my bug tracking system. So forth. And you see, not directly look like the same feature as Jira, but we do have a REST API, so really any test result can be imported to any system. So all the data you see here can be imported. So as Hardy was speaking about scaling tests, obviously this one batch contains, as you saw, a bunch of tests, a bunch of screens. But even if we were to this step as an automation tester, if I sent this to a manual tester to review, 36 screens this step, even if they took a minute and a half to take a look at each screen, it would take them, X amount of minutes. Applitools is smart enough via AI to look at all those images together, called group by similar differences, and what it's going to do is look at all those images and make sure there's no unique errors, and if there is, they're going to group them together. So what it did essentially was 40 out of those, 76 screenshots, I can review here. As you can see, the demo account, someone messed with this already, but the logo was missing in 40 of the screenshots, 40 of the pages. So that way I can say, hey, 40 of my pages had an error in the latest release. Let's reject those test runs. Let's keep the existing baselines. We'll notify someone about it. The other 36 being the colored logo. So, makes sense so far?
So you could approve all those at once.
I can approve of all these at once if that was my new logo. I don't think GitHub would like that much. So a couple different use case examples. I want to take you through a Gmail application. As it can get, that was a pretty straightforward example, but we're talking about a little more, and I kind of briefly mentioned about the different match levels. You can see on my left-hand side, there's 4 different match levels you can choose from within the platform, and this will all be coded as well. So you don't need to have the UI interaction. Exact basically means, hey, I want to do a quick pixel comparison test. Obviously, it doesn't really work well for dynamic content. So if you use an open source visual comparison solution in the past, you probably know there's a lot of false positives associated with testing dynamic content, things like that. So we really recommend using exact. Strict is the Applitools patented algorithm saying, hey, I'm going to mimic any detection that an end user would see, ignoring rendering differences between browsers, obviously. An end user would never notice what the Chrome homepage would look like versus Firefox, unless it was super broken. Layout, similar to say, hey, I want to ignore the content on the page. Let's say take yahoo.com, and each page load is going to be different content, right? So how do you test that visually? Layout algorithm is going to say, I just want to make sure the structure of the page is okay. There's no components that are missing or overlaps, but the content we're going to ignore. So I'll show you an example of that. This Gmail application here, you can also mix and match these match levels. So I tested this whole page strict, but I can go over here. And as you can see, there's different, I can draw a box around this component and test that in different layout, or I can ignore that altogether. pretty neat feature there. Going back to the cross-browser example I just mentioned, so if I ran this test, paychecks.com, you can see on two sides, I ran this in Chrome versus IE. And if I toggle, you can see that slight rendering difference. Each browser, as we all know, renders differently. You can see the slight difference testing. If I ran this in layout, so you're not getting an error. If I ran this in strict, the whole page is not going to line up. This is really the power of the layout algorithm. But you can still see there's an error highlighted where one browser rendered one button visible, the other one didn't. So it's an end user. One looks visible, the other one doesn't. So that would totally 100% pass the Selenium test, right? But a visual test, it does not. Going to localization testing, different languages. Another good use for the layout algorithm is different languages, English for Spanish, testing multiple localizations. German has different character lengths than English. So let's say if I had, Spanish over here, German, I can just make sure my page looks visibly correct in any language I'm testing. More so, once that's established, I can run a Spanish for Spanish layout and make sure the content looks correct. If there's a misspelling or something, we'll be able to catch that. I think that was all we wanted to show. On your end card.
Yeah, no, I think that's
So, any questions?
For things that aren't so simple that are behind logins, session-based web pages, 3 or 4 deep.
So it's important to remember that Applitools is really, I like to use the word dummy because it's really mimicking your environment. So whatever script or whatever your ecosystem looks like, whatever your script looks like, all we're consuming is the image file in our system. We're not consuming the script, we're not consuming any test data or environment data. We're just collecting that metadata from the image file. So that allows us to really work with any sort of application. We're obviously looking at examples, but let's talk about generation for PDFs. Like, how do you test that in an automated fashion? A lot of manual testers struggle with that. So, running a PDF test, running a bunch of PDFs to automate that visually, good way to use Applitools. We're working with IBM Watson on health scans, brain scans. So they're using art and imagery technology to look at differences between brain scans. So login scripts, yes. I mean, anything beyond a public web page is not a problem because it's leveraging your environment.
Yeah, so if you've written a functional test, right, in whatever language, you're probably going beyond that page to do the functional testing as well, right? We're just telling it when to take a screenshot. You want a screenshot of this page before the login? You want another one after the login? You just tell them to take that screenshot that sends it to us. So, whether you're feeding our tool that he talked about that just crawls all the pages, or whether you're leveraging your existing script that someone's written to do those tests behind a login, we're just piggybacked onto that and telling it when to take a screenshot.
And one thing I wanted to note before we started was, to Michael's comment when he started, we're super committed to the open source project as well. We're actually, our development team is the owners of the Selenium IDE project, so we're definitely committed to Selenium and open source. I know we're a commercial product, and as Michael pointed, there's some tendencies there, but that's our team motto, what we strive towards. So we're not coming in here They're really built to be open source oriented.
But just to be clear, Applitools is not an open source tool.
It is a commercial solution. It's really the story of the founding. Really, our founders were test managers themselves, and they identified a gap in the SDLC. Hey, how do I automate my visual testing cycles without really building out a brand new manual to do that? So they developed the algorithms, and that's really going forward where we are today. So how do you really scale as an enterprise organization the number of screens you work with StormRunner or the other emulation services generating so many screens? How do you really eliminate that bottleneck? That's really where we play. Makes sense to everybody?
How does this tool handle the dynamically loaded images? Let's say based on the selection, I selected this country, and then the flag shows that the country's flag. So how does this handle dynamically?
Well, going back to you're selecting, you're telling the solution the baseline, right? Obviously, we would love AI to say, hey, this is correct in the world, but we're not there yet. There's so many processes to build a solution like that today. I think that's where we'll eventually be. But essentially, you're telling the solution what the baseline image is, and every test run, I want that to be the end result, right? So any difference detected, that's where the AI comes into play and said, hey, my newest test run is featured from baseline. That's when we'll report the difference. So
Yeah.
keep it very simple.
And I think in addition to that, to answer your question is, it depends on the mode that you're running the test in. Like you said, there's different match levels. If you were running that in mode, that wouldn't be a failure because it's within the bounds whether the flag's a U.S. flag or a Mexican flag, right? It's still within the layout that's okay, right? If it's something that's going to change all the time, then like he showed you, you could create a region. Since we know the flag's going to change depending on the country we're in, let's ignore that, right? And then there's other algorithms too, like content algorithms and things like that. But there's a couple of ways to address your question. Whether it's the layout, whether it's the match level you're using, or whether it's a region.
Any other questions, guys?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you for your presentation today. Sorry, I was running late trying to get here today.